I was still breathing when they began planning a world without me in it. I remember thinking the ceiling tiles above my hospital bed looked like a field of cracked ice, white, fragile, waiting for weight to break them. I stared at them while my son and his wife huddled just outside the door, whispering with the kind of urgency people usually reserve for emergencies or gossip. They forgot I had ears. They forgot I had a pulse. They forgot I was still their mother. I heard my name tangled in their sentences. Not Mama. Not Ma. Just my name spoken like a business deal they needed to finalize before lunchtime. It's strange how the people you raise can look at the same life you lived and see nothing but things. Numbers, rooms, objects, waiting for a new owner. My name is Georgia May Collins. I am 78 years old. I have outlived my husband, 3 cancers, a car accident that nearly folded my ribs, and a broken heart or two. But that afternoon, lying under bright hospital lights, I nearly stopped fighting, not because my body was tired, but because my son, my only boy, had already buried me. Calvin has his father's broad shoulders, but none of his softness. He stands like a man who thinks gravity owes him something. His wife, Denise, was the one with the sharper whisper. I heard her before I saw her. That clipped, impatient tone that always made me straighten my spine even when she wasn't talking to me. If she doesn't have a clear beneficiary, Denise muttered, it'll take months, maybe years. We need this sorted before summer. We, as if she and my son had become shareholders in my existence. Calvin grunted. I'll talk to the doctor. If she's not improving, we can request early access to a soft rustle of papers. A sigh. I closed my eyes. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'd taken a fall down my porch steps 2 days earlier. Slipped on a patch of wet leaves because I was stubborn enough to go out without my cane. My hip caught the edge of the stair, and I spent the night pressing a cold washcloth to the bruise. I only came to the hospital when the pain climbed high enough to steal my breath. It was just a fracture. Just a night of observation. But my son acted like it was the end. Maybe it should have been, for him. The end of whatever piece of my heart I'd been saving. When the nurse came in to check my vitals, I pretended to be asleep because I didn't want anyone noticing the tears that had collected beneath my eyelids. The nurse adjusted the blanket and whispered, "You're safe, Ms. Collins." Funny, how a stranger could offer what my own blood forgot. I didn't speak until evening. Calvin walked in with that false brightness he puts on when he wants to sound caring. "Mama," he said, too loudly, "you should have told us your hip was this bad." It wasn't this bad. The doctor said I'd heal fine with rest. But Calvin needed a narrative that made his presence look heroic. Denise hovered behind him, holding her purse like she expected someone to snatch it. "You scared us," Calvin added. "You scared me first," I said. He blinked, confused. Denise shifted her weight. I asked him to sit. The chair squeaked under him. Denise stayed standing, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room as if she was taking inventory. "How much do you think the house is worth?" she asked suddenly. Not even a minute of pretending. Not even the courtesy of easing me into the betrayal. "My house," I repeated slowly. She shrugged. "Real estate is high right now. If we renovate," my chest tightened. I looked at my son. "You already planning renovations?" Calvin opened his mouth. Closed it, opened it again. His face flushed. "Mama, we're just being responsible. In case things turn. In case I die," I said. Silence. Denise looked at her phone. They both forgot that. I once worked double shifts in a textile mill to give that boy braces. That I walked through thunderstorms to parent-teacher meetings. That I used to sit by his bed and smooth his hair back when he had nightmares after his father's funeral. People forget the things that built them. They only remember the parts that benefit them. When they left that night, I exhaled so deeply that my ribs ached. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stared at the wall and let the truth settle like dust. They were waiting for me to stop breathing, and they weren't even subtle about it. But destiny has funny timing. Because the person who saved me wasn't my son. It wasn't even family by law. It was someone who walked into the room the next morning with a shy smile and a stack of textbooks tucked under her arm. "Mia, my granddaughter. You wouldn't think we shared blood if you lined us up side by side. She has hair braided to her waist, bright eyes that see too much, and the kind of gentleness you can't teach. But she has my hands. Slender fingers, soft palms, the kind made for holding stories and secrets. Mama G," she whispered as she came toward me. "I heard you fell." She dropped her books on the chair and rushed to my side. No clipboard. No questions about documents. Just concern, so pure it felt like warm syrup drizzling over the cold parts of my heart. I didn't plan on crying. But when she touched my cheek, something in me cracked open. The grief, the disbelief, the betrayal, everything spilled through that one trembling breath. Mia didn't flinch. She held my hand and whispered, "Tell me." And so I did. I told her about the voices in the hallway, the division of my belongings, the talk of renovations, the way my son looked at me like a chapter he was ready to skip. Mia listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She just let me speak. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Let's make sure they don't get a thing." I stared at her. She was 23, thin as a willow branch, heart too tender for the world. But her eyes burned with a fire I recognized from my younger days. A fire I'd lost somewhere between grief and motherhood. She squeezed my hand. "You're not done yet, Mama G." I believed her. The next day, I asked the nurse for the phone. My voice was steady when I called the lawyer who handled my late husband's estate, Ms. Farron. Sharp as a needle, doesn't miss a thing. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk and warm. "Georgia, I heard about your fall. How are you?" "I'm ready to make some changes," I said. She didn't ask what kind. She just said, "I'll be there in an hour." The sun was slipping behind the hospital blinds when she arrived. She wore a maroon blazer and carried a small leather case. She sat beside my bed and asked gently, "Tell me what happened." By the time I finished, her lips had pressed into a thin line. "We'll update your will today," she said. "But I think you want something more than that." I nodded. "I want to make sure they can't touch anything. Not a drawer, not a spoon. Not the land my father left me. I want everything to go someplace they'd never expect." Her eyebrow lifted. "And where is that?" "To someone who loves without cost." She didn't need further explanation. She already knew. Mia returned that evening with soup and a notebook she used for her poetry classes. She sat near my feet and read lines from her favorite authors. Her voice flowed like water through an old stone pathé. Gentle, steady, shaping the world with its softness. Watching her, something long dormant inside me stirred back to life. Hope, not hope for my son. That chapter was closed. But hope that my story didn't end with disappointment. Hope that love, even when quiet, could still bloom in unexpected corners. That night, when the hospital quieted and the machines hummed like a lullaby, I closed my eyes and whispered a promise into the dim room. I will not let them write my ending, because my ending, my legacy, belonged to someone who had shown me more devotion in one afternoon than my own child had in 20 years, and that is where everything began to change. The morning after Mia read to me, I woke before the nurses made their rounds. The hallway lights were still dim, soft and amber, as if the building itself was trying not to wake the sick too loudly. The beeping monitors around me sounded like slow, distant heartbeats. I lay there listening to them and thinking about how fragile the world becomes when you're forced to lie still in it. It makes you listen. It makes you notice who's whispering outside your door and who never steps through it. Calvin didn't come that morning. Denise didn't text. But Mia returned before the sun fully rose, wearing yesterday's hoodie and an old pair of jeans. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, and she held a bag of muffins she must have picked up along the way. She curled into the visitor's chair like it belonged to her. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Figured you couldn't either." I smiled. The kind of small smile you give someone who knows your secrets before you say them. "Sit," I said. "Tell me something good." She told me about her classes, about how one of her professors read her short story aloud and praised the imagery. She told me about a stray cat that followed her home and how she fed it tuna even though she's allergic. She told me everything except one thing: why she was really there. I waited until her words slowed like the end of a song. "You're worried about me," I said quietly. She didn't deny it. She just took my hand and traced the wrinkles with her thumb. "I don't think they see you," she whispered. "Not the real you. Not the woman who raised Dad. Not the woman who kept the family together. They see opportunities, things to manage, things to take." Her voice trembled. "But I see you." Something warm bloomed in my chest. Maybe it was pride, maybe grief, maybe the desperate relief of finally being recognized. Later that day, Ms. Farron returned with freshly printed documents and a calm, focused expression. She went over each page with a precision that reminded me of surgeons in old movies. She explained the trust, the clauses, the protections. She explained how each line removed control from the people who assumed they'd get it automatically. "And this part," she said, tapping a line near the bottom. Blocks any attempt to contest your decisions unless they want to disqualify themselves entirely. I hummed, satisfaction curling through me like warm tea. Good. Mia watched from the chair in the corner, eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. She didn't know the specifics yet, not everything, but she understood enough to know I was reclaiming something that had slipped from my hands slowly over the years. My dignity, my voice, my future. When the papers were signed, I felt something inside me settle back into place. Not triumph, not vengeance, something quieter, like a door finally closing on a draft that had chilled the house for too long. Calvin and Denise finally arrived that afternoon, walking in as if they owned the air. Denise carried a clipboard. Calvin carried a frown he thought looked concerned. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." "No," I replied. "You need to listen." They blinked, startled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sit upright. I just spoke with a calmness so heavy it silenced the room. Denise looked offended. Calvin looked confused. "I heard you," I continued, "outside my door, talking about renovations, beneficiaries, speeding things up, freezing my accounts." I watched the guilt flutter across Calvin's face, then disappear behind stubborn pride. "Mama," he began, "you misunderstood." "No," I said gently. "I finally understood." Denise stiffened. "We were trying to help. You're overreacting." Funny how people like her use that word, like a shield. Overreacting. As if my ears weren't my own. As if betrayal were a preference, not a wound. "You made plans without me," I said. "Plans for my home, my life, my things. But you never once asked what I wanted." Calvin exhaled, irritated. "We were preparing. I'm still alive," I said. "And I have prepared to." That silenced them. I didn't explain further. Not yet. I wanted the truth to arrive in its own time, with its own weight. When they left, Denise muttered something under her breath about ungrateful parents. Calvin kissed my cheek but avoided my eyes. I watched them go, and all I felt was distance stretching and stretching like a rope, finally freed from tension. That night, the hospital smelled like disinfectant and something faintly metallic, like wet coins. The machines hummed. The hallway lights buzzed softly. The world felt both too big and too small. I thought about my son. About the lines on his face that reminded me of a boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. I wondered where that boy had gone. I wondered if I pushed him away or if the world did. I wondered when he learned to speak to me. Like a creditor instead of a mother. But grief can only sit in one spot for so long before it becomes a stone. And that night, I wasn't ready to carry stones. The next morning, the doctor cleared me to go home. Mia was the one who wheeled me out. She'd brought her little car, the one with the dented bumper and glitter stickers on the dashboard. She buckled my seatbelt gently, like she was afraid I'd shatter in her hands. When she sat behind the wheel, she let out a breath she had been holding for days. "You're safe now," she said softly. I looked out the window at the moving world, trees passing, sky shifting, light changing shape. "I wasn't in danger," I whispered. She gave me a look in the rearview mirror. "Yes, you were." They were counting your breaths like they were counting dollars. The truth of that sat quietly inside the car, like another passenger. When we arrived home, the house felt different. Big, too big, like it had been holding its breath in my absence. Mia helped me inside and fussed over me until I made her stop. She made tea, fluffed pillows, opened windows. She took care of me the way I once took care of her, gentle, efficient, quiet, no need to be thanked. That evening, I sat at my old kitchen table, tracing the faded wood grain with my fingertips. The sun had started to dip, painting orange streaks across my countertops. The kettle whistled softly. Mia sat across from me with her notebook, doodling absent-mindedly. It was then that I said the words I'd been holding. "I've changed the will." Mia froze. "Mama G, I gave it all to you." Her eyes widened. Her hands shook. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "Why?" "Because you loved me without asking what you'd get in return." She swallowed hard, and her throat worked like she was holding back tears. "I don't deserve." "Yes," I said. "You do." She rose from the table and hugged me gently, as if afraid she might break something fragile. But nothing about me was fragile, not anymore. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the dim living room. The street lamps outside cast a soft glow across the carpet. Everything felt quiet. Everything felt clear. I had reclaimed my story. I had chosen the ending. And I had given my life to someone who saw me as more than a possession. Little did I know. The storm was only beginning. I thought signing those papers would be the end of it. A quiet click, a locked door, a line drawn that no one could cross. I imagined the rest of my days like the afternoons I'd loved years ago: slow sun, humming fridge, a cup of tea cooling beside a radio sermon, no drama, no storms, just the steady tick of a life I chose. But greed doesn't go quiet. It sulks, it circles, it waits until you exhale and then it bites. The first tremor came 3 days after I came home. Calvin called, not to ask how I was feeling, not to ask if I needed groceries or if the medication was making me dizzy. He cleared his throat and asked, "Hey, did you sign something with that lawyer again?" Denise saw a strange envelope on the counter before we left the hospital. There it was, the thing he cared about, not my fainting, not my blood sugar, the envelope. I slid the phone a little farther from my ear so he wouldn't hear the smile in my voice. "I sign a lot of things these days," I said. "Consent forms, discharge papers, birthday cards for people who never visit." "You'll have to be more specific, baby." He didn't like that. His silence crackled down the line. "It's just," he started, and then his voice shifted into that reasonable tone that always meant trouble. "It's just that Denise and I are trying to make sure everything's organized. You know, in case something happens again. The hospital said your blood pressure dropped pretty low. We need to think about guardianship and power of attorney, that kind of thing." I looked around my kitchen while he talked, at the spice jars I'd labeled by hand, at the small crack in the wall above the stove, at the faded curtain with the strawberry print. I had mended that curtain 3 times instead of buying a new one because I loved it, because it held memories, because it was mine, my house, my curtain, my life. And here was my son on the phone, talking about legal control like he was ordering a pizza. Nothing happened to my mind. I said quietly, "Just my blood sugar?" He chuckled, but it sounded tight. "I'm not saying you're out of it, Mom. I'm just saying it never hurts to have the paperwork lined up. We can't wait until you're confused. You wouldn't want the state stepping in, would you?" That, right there, the threat dressed as concern. "I'll talk to my attorney," I said. "Thank you for caring." He tried again. "Mom, you know legal stuff stresses you out. You should let us handle it. Denise works with contracts all day. This is what she does. We can make sure you're protected." "I already am," I said, my voice soft but solid. "But I'll keep that in mind." When we hung up, my hand trembled for a few seconds. Not from fear, from anger that had nowhere to go. I placed my palm flat on the table, fingers splayed wide, and counted my breaths until my heart slowed. Then I reached for my notebook. I wrote down every word. Not because I was losing my memory, because I planned to keep receipts. Over the next week, they came in waves. Phone calls, messages, Denise dropping by at odd hours just to check. Each time, she had papers with her, tucked neatly in a leather folder like a missionary carrying pamphlets. One afternoon, she arrived when Mia wasn't there. She kissed the air next to my cheek and set a stack of forms gently on the table. "These are from Dr. Patel's office," she said, sliding a pen toward me. "Standard stuff. Information releases, emergency contact confirmation. And this one," she tapped a thicker packet, "just gives Calvin temporary decision-making power if something goes sideways again. It's really just a formality." I pulled my reading glasses from the little dish by the salt shaker and placed them on my nose. I didn't touch the papers. "Why temporary?" I asked. She smiled, all teeth. "Because the courts like that word better. It sounds less permanent." At least she was honest about the strategy. "Uh-huh," I said. "And what happens if I don't sign?" She shrugged, but her shoulders were stiff. "Nothing immediate. But if you end up back in the hospital and the doctors need someone to authorize care or move funds for a facility, it could get messy. We're just trying to make things smoother. For you, for all of us." "For all of us," I repeated, meaning for you. Her smile flickered, just a little. "You're being unfair. We're the ones who'll have to clean everything up if something goes wrong." "I've been cleaning everything up since the day you married my son," I said calmly. "I think I'll manage the rest." Her eyes flashed, but she swallowed whatever she wanted to say. "So you're refusing?" I said. "I'm thinking." "Don't think too long," she said lightly. "None of us are getting younger." When she left, she forgot the pen. I turned it over in my hand and realized it had their realtor's name printed on the side. Of course it did. That night, the house was so still I could hear the tick of the clock in the hallway like footfalls. I sat in the dark living room, not bothering to turn on a lamp, and let my mind wander down long, crooked roads. It walked back to late nights at the kitchen table, paying bills with coupons and overtime pay. It walked back to buying Calvin's first pair of basketball shoes instead of a new winter coat for myself. It walked back to the day I made the last mortgage payment, standing in the bank parking lot, staring at the receipt with tears in my eyes, because for the first time in my life, something big and solid and safe had my name on it alone. No one had been there that day to clap for me. No one had said, "You did it, Mama." I'd gone home, sat on the front steps with a glass of iced tea, and let the quiet applause of the neighborhood be enough. Now, after all that, after all the years of stretching pennies and swallowing pride, my own child wanted to slide my life across a desk like a file to be processed. The next morning, Mia came over before her classes. She let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago for emergencies and plants. And the smell of cheap campus coffee followed her into the kitchen. "Good morning, sunshine," I said. She studied my face for a moment, reading the small lines worry leaves behind. "What did they do now?" she asked. "Left me some paperwork," I said. "We're all very popular with the courts lately." She sat down and pulled the stack toward her. She didn't say anything while she read. Her eyes moved steadily, her jaw tightening. When she finished, she set the papers down like they were something unclean. "They want to make you a guest in your own story," she said quietly. "Yes," I said. "They want to hold the pen." "And you?" she asked. "What do you want?" I leaned back in my chair and listened to the house breathe. "I want to leave this world on my feet, not on someone else's leash." She nodded slowly. "Then we'll make sure you do." I hadn't had that word in a long time. Not in any way that counted. Later that week, I met Ms. Farron again, this time in my own living room. She sat on my couch with a slim briefcase at her feet and her glasses perched low on her nose. "They're circling," I told her, handing over my notebook. "I think they smell the end before I do." She read the quotes, the dates, the descriptions, her lips pressed into a thin, displeased line. "Good," she said finally. I blinked. Good that you wrote it all down," she clarified. "If they try to claim you aren't capable of making your own decisions, this shows the opposite. You recognized their behavior, you described it clearly, you sought counsel. That's competence, not confusion. Will it stop them?" I asked. Her smile was small but fierce. "It will stop the courts from helping them." That was enough for me. We reviewed the trust again, line by line. We added one more clause, not because we had to, but because my heart needed it. In the event that my son or his wife attempt to challenge my decisions, it read, "Let this document stand as my final word." I was not coerced. I was simply paying attention. I signed it with steady hands. The storm reached my front door 2 Sundays later. I had just come back from church, a little more tired than usual, but still lifted by the choir's last hymn. The air outside was soft and heavy, the sky full of low, thoughtful clouds. I was halfway out of my shoes when I heard a car door slam hard at the curb. Calvin didn't knock. He never had much patience for doors. He opened it and walked in, breathless, as if he'd run from the driveway. "Mama, what is this?" he demanded, waving his phone. Denise followed behind him, eyes sharp, jaw set. I sighed and sank gently onto the arm of the sofa. "What's this?" He thrust the screen in my direction. It was an email notification from the bank. Something about account structuring. Another about the house title transfer. He must have been listed as an emergency contact on an old form somewhere. I'd meant to change that. "You moved everything," he said, voice rising. "All the accounts. The house. Even the damn burial policy. And you didn't tell us?" I watched the vein in his temple throb. Watched the way his hands shook not with grief, but with outrage. "No," I said evenly. "I didn't." Denise stepped in, smoothing her blouse. "This isn't rational," she said. "Who advised you to do this? Was it that lawyer? Or was it MIA? She's been here a lot, filling your head with ideas." My heart flared. "Careful," I said softly. "Oh, come on," Denise snapped. "This isn't you. You wouldn't do this to your own child, to your family. You must be confused, or scared, or tired of being treated like a checkbook with a pulse." I said. Calvin flinched. "I am not confused." I continued. "I am not lost. I am not wandering around forgetting where I put my shoes. I am a grown woman who worked for 50 years to build something out of nothing. And I have decided where it goes when I'm done with it." To her, he spat, and there it was, ugly and bare. To Mia. I paused. This was the crossroads. Once I said it out loud, there'd be no putting the lid back on their expectations, no softening the blow, no pretending we were all going to hug this out over pot roast. "Yes," I said quietly. To her, to the work she'd do with it, to the people who will walk through these doors one day not to measure what they'll inherit, but to learn, to grow, to touch books they never thought they'd understand. It goes to that. Calvin laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You're going to throw away our family home on strangers, on some charity project, on a girl who doesn't even have a real job yet. She has more of a job than you've done with your own heart in years, I said. His eyes flashed with hurt then, real hurt, not just offended pride. Underneath all his angles and sharp words, he was still that boy on the porch once, waiting for me to come back from a double shift. For a moment, my resolve trembled. Then I remembered him in the hallway of the hospital, talking about me like an asset. The softness hardened again. I always planned to leave you something, I said. I thought one day when I was gone, you'd walk through this house and feel nothing but gratitude, but you couldn't even wait for me to stop breathing before you started rearranging my life. We were planning, he insisted. We were being responsible. No, I said. You were rehearsing my absence. Denise exhaled sharply. We're not going to let this stand. We'll get a second opinion. We'll have a competency evaluation done officially. Once a doctor says you're impaired, already had several. I cut in. All normal. All filed. And any attempt to contest the trust just locks you out further. That's in writing too. Calvin stared at me like I had grown a stranger's face. How could you do this to us? He whispered. I didn't do anything to you, I said. You did this to yourselves. I just stopped pretending not to see it. He stood there for a long time, breathing hard, looking at the woman who'd give him everything and realizing there was nothing left for him to script. Then he turned away. Come on, Denise, he muttered. We're not getting through. Not today. As he reached the door, I called his name. He paused, hand on the knob. I am still your mother, I said. You can come here and sit with me. You can bring me soup. You can mow the lawn. You can call and tell me your day was hard. You can do all of that with empty hands and full heart, and I will never turn you away. He didn't turn around. But if you come here wanting what I own, instead of who I am, I finished, you will find the door locked. That's my line. He left without a word. The house shook when the door closed. Or maybe that was just me. I didn't cry until later, when Mia came back from class and found me sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, my hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. She didn't say, what happened? She looked at my face, at the papers crumpled in the trash, at the untouched plate on the counter, and she knew. She knelt beside my chair and laid her head gently against my shoulder the way she used to do when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Let it out, she whispered. The walls can hold it. So I did. I cried for the boy who grew into a man who could talk about his mother like an obligation. I cried for the years I spent stretching myself thin so he'd never feel poor. I cried for the dreams I had of holidays in this house, full of laughter and forgiveness and second chances that now seemed more like fiction than Mia's novels. I cried until the tight knot behind my ribs loosened and something else took its place. Not bitterness, not revenge, something firmer, like the feeling you get when you finally put heavy boxes down after carrying them alone for too long. When the storm inside me passed, I wiped my face and looked at Mia. Her eyes were red too. You don't have to give it all to me, she said softly, surprising me. The house, the money, any of it. If you wake up tomorrow and change your mind, I'll still be here. I'll still be the one making tea and reading to you and dragging that stubborn body of yours to doctor's appointments. I know, I said. That's why I'm not changing it. The next few months moved like slow water. Some days were bright, full of small joys, the smell of biscuits baking, the feel of sunlight on my knees through the open window, the sound of children playing down the block. Some days were dull and gray, the kind where time feels heavy and the walls close in a little. Calvin didn't come around much after that. When he did, he came alone. No Denise, no folders, no fake smiles. He'd stand near the door like a man waiting on a bus, ask if I needed anything in a voice that sounded like it belonged to a nurse on the phone, not a son, and then be gone in 15 minutes. He never mentioned the will again, not with words, but sometimes I'd catch his eyes drifting over the pictures on the wall. The quilts folded on the shelf, the groove on the arm of the chair where his father used to rest his hand. For a heartbeat, his face would soften, boyish, almost sorry. Then the shutters would slam down again. Pride is a thick curtain. You can't pull it back for somebody else. They've got to do that part themselves. While he hovered at the edge, Mia stood right in the center and started dreaming out loud. She'd camp at my table with that old laptop and say, "Picture this, Mama G, we push your dining table to the wall. Bring in long folding tables. Girls spread out their books. Here, a reading corner by the window. Soft chairs, a shelf that's just poetry." She'd pace the living room, hands flying. "Whiteboard here. Bulletin board there, with job listings and scholarships. A little coffee station so nobody feels like they're getting charity, just community. Her ideas came like spring water, clear, constant. I'd close my eyes and suddenly my quiet house wasn't a waiting room for my funeral anymore. It was full of young women, heads bent over worksheets. Laughter spilling down the hallway, someone dropping off donated backpacks on the porch. The ache in my chest didn't feel like emptiness then. It felt like room for something new. The storm outside hadn't given up. Though, one day a letter arrived, typed by a stranger's hand. Care recommendations, long-term placement options. Behind it, a note in Calvin's handwriting. Mom, we found a nice facility, just a short stay so you can get more support. Think about it. See, I didn't have to. I knew exactly what it meant. Move her out before she roots this place with something we can't uproot. Put her somewhere with visiting hours and policies, where decisions can be made over her head. I took that letter to Miss Farron. She read it, lips pressed tight. They can't force you, she said. Not while you're paying your own bills and remembering your own mind. And if they try, we'll let a judge read your letter. Your words are straighter than theirs. I laughed. It felt like opening a window in a stale room. A week later, they came with glossy brochures and sharpened concern. We just want what's best, Calvin said. Stairs, yard, medzits, a lot. This place is safe. You wouldn't be alone. I'm not alone, I told him. He talked about legal options, vulnerability, responsibility. Denise called me stubborn. I called them transparent. Finally I said, I know about the guardianship papers. The ones that let you sign for me, sell for me, speak for me. This, I tapped my own forehead, still works. I heard you. I saw you. I remember. Silence sat down between us. For once in your life, I whispered, you might have to look at what you've become. He stood, threw out a last warning about the day the stairs would beat me, and left. The door didn't slam. It just clicked. Soft. Final. That night I lay in bed, watching a patch of streetlight on the ceiling, thinking about how folks talk about old age like a sunset. Nobody mentions the children standing on the cliff, trying to push it down faster. I thought about Mia too, somewhere under harsh library lights, chewing her pen, no idea what kind of storm she'd walked into just by loving me right. No idea about the keys she'd one day hold, or the girls who'd walk through my door with shaking hands to ask, can you help me? Give her strength, I whispered to the dark. Let her know my love wasn't a trap. It was a seed. In the morning, I woke lighter. My children stayed gone. The phone quieted. But the house began to hum. Mia cleared a shelf for used books and dog-eared GED guides, applied for a little grant, and danced in my kitchen when it was approved. One evening, a girl named Lena hovered on the sidewalk, backpack slipping off her shoulder. She followed Mia inside, eyes wide, voice small. I want to get my GED, she said. Reading's hard. I can't pay, but I can clean. You've already paid, I told her, with courage. We weren't even open yet, but that night my table became a classroom. Mia broke down sentences while Lena circled words in her notebook like they were diamonds. I pretended to crochet, but really I was listening to their voices' hesitation melting into hope. Later, when the house was quiet again, I walked through the room slowly. The walls held a new kind of echo now. A girl who'd been told she wasn't enough had dared to ask for more. In my kitchen, at my table. And I thought, if this is all my name ever buys, it's enough. My children may never sit in this house again. Holidays may stay quiet. Their pictures may feel like fossils someday. But this home isn't waiting on them anymore. It's waiting on Lena, and every woman who comes after her. For the rustle of notebook paper. For the low murmur of questions. For laughter breaking through shame. From here, at this age, I can see the whole road. Where I started. Where they drifted. Where Mia is walking. Where girls like Lena might stand one day. Diplomas in hand. Keys in their own doors. Telling someone younger, come in, babysit. Let's read this together. You don't always get to choose who carries your blood, but you can choose who carries your name. And sometimes, the sweetest kind of revenge isn't fire. It's light. A small house on a quiet street, porch lamp glowing, door unlocked, voices inside. Proof that I was here, that I mattered, and that I chose, with clear eyes where my love would live when I was gone.